All right, if you're gearing up for your OCR GCSE economics exam, you've come to the right place. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most important government objectives, price stability. Let's get you prepped and ready for any exam question they throw at you.
So, here's our game plan. We'll kick off with the key definitions you just have to know. Then we'll look at how we measure inflation, get into the nitty-gritty of what causes it and its effects, and then we'll finish up with some top-level evaluation. Honestly, this is the perfect structure for a brilliant exam answer.
Right, let's start at the beginning. Getting your definitions spot on in the exam is, well, it's easy marks, isn't it? So let's make sure we've got these completely locked down.
So what on earth is inflation? Well, the official definition is a sustained increase in the general price level. But what does that actually mean? It means your money is losing its power. Every pound you have buys you a little bit less than it did before. In short, the cost of living is on the rise.
Now, you might think the government wants zero inflation, but that's not the case. Their goal is price stability. The Bank of England's job is to keep inflation low, yes, but also stable, and they aim for a target of 2% per year. Why not zero? Well, a little bit of inflation is actually seen as a sign of a healthy economy, one that's growing.
Okay, this next bit is absolutely crucial for your exam. You have to understand the difference between nominal and real values. Think of the nominal value as just the face value. It's the number on your payslip. But the real value, now that's what really counts. It's your actual purchasing power, once you factor in inflation.
Let's use a really clear example. Say you get a 5% pay rise. Fantastic, that's your nominal increase. But if the price of everything in the shops has gone up by 3%, your real increase, the actual extra stuff you can buy, is only 2%. That is the real value.
So, if the target is 2%, how in the world is it actually measured? For your exam, you need to know about the main method we use here in the UK. So here's the puzzle. How do you possibly track the price changes of thousands upon thousands of different things to get just one single inflation figure? The answer is something called the Consumer Price Index, or the CPI.
It's actually a pretty clever four-step process. First, they do a massive survey to create a virtual basket of goods and services that a typical household buys. Second, every item gets a weighting. So petrol, which takes up a big chunk of a family's budget, has a much heavier weight than, say, a tin of beans. Third, this basket gets updated every single year to make sure it's still relevant. And finally, every month, they track the price changes and use those weights to create the final CPI number.
Okay, don't be put off by the table. Let's just see this in action. Imagine a very simple economy that only buys pizzas and biscuits. In year 1, the total basket costs £42. But in year 2, prices go up, and that same basket now costs £63. The calculation turns this into a CPI of 150. Since the starting year is always 100, that means we've had a 50% inflation rate. And notice how the pizza price has a way bigger impact. That's because it's weighted more heavily in the basket.
Okay, so we know what inflation is and how we measure it. Now for the really important analysis part. What causes it? For your exam, you've got to be able to explain the two main culprits.
These are the two types you need to know inside out. You've got demand pull inflation, which is perfectly summed up by that classic phrase, too much money chasing too few goods. It's what happens when everyone, us, businesses, the government, is trying to buy more stuff than the economy can actually make. Then you have cost push inflation. That comes from the other side, the supply side. It's when it just gets more expensive for firms to produce things.
Let's have a look at demand pull on a graph. So picture this. Consumer confidence suddenly surges. Everyone feels good. Everyone wants to spend. Aggregate demand shifts to the right, from D1 to D2. But the economy can't just magically produce more goods overnight. So with more demand than supply, what can firms do? They can raise their prices, from P1 up to P2. They are literally pulling the price level higher.
Now for cost push, your examiner is looking for this exact kind of logical chain. Step 1, a key cost of production goes up. Say the price of imported oil skyrockets. Step 2, this means firms' costs have just shot up. So, step 3, what do they do to protect their profits? They pass that extra cost on to us, the consumer, in the form of higher prices. They are pushing their higher costs onto us.
So we know the causes, but so what? Why is price stability such a big deal? Let's break down the consequences of inflation by looking at who it affects and how. You see, when inflation is high and unpredictable, it hits everyone, but it doesn't hit everyone equally.
Let's dig into the impact on 4 key groups: consumers, producers, savers, and the government.
For us, for consumers, the biggest risk is a fall in our standard of living. If prices are rising by, say, 5%, but your wages only creep up by 2%, you are getting poorer in real terms. And this hits people on fixed incomes, like pensioners, and those on lower incomes the absolute hardest, because things like food and energy take up a much bigger slice of their budget.
And savers, they really lose out too. I mean, think about it. If your savings account is paying you 1% interest, but inflation is roaring along at 3%, the real value of your hard-earned cash in the bank is actually shrinking by 2% every single year. It just puts you off saving.
For businesses or producers, inflation just breeds uncertainty. It makes it incredibly difficult to plan for the future, to make investments. They're also facing pressure from workers for higher wages. And this is a big one. If prices in the UK are rising faster than in other countries, our exports become more expensive, they become less competitive, and that can really harm our economy.
And finally, the government finds itself caught in a real bind. On one hand, there's massive pressure to increase state pensions and benefits just so people can keep up with the cost of living. But on the other hand, the Bank of England might have to hike up interest rates to get inflation under control, and that can slow down the whole economy, maybe even risk a recession. It's a really tough balancing act.
Right, for this last section, let's put on our critical thinking hats. This is where you move beyond just knowing the facts and start to evaluate them. This is the key to unlocking those top grades.
So we use the CPI as our main measure. But is it perfect? Not by a long shot. For a start, it doesn't include certain groups, like pensioners, and their spending habits can be very different from the average household. It also has a really hard time accounting for quality improvements. You know, is your new phone more expensive because of inflation or because it's 1,000 times better than the old one? Plus, that basket can be a bit slow to catch up with new trends. These are all fantastic evaluation points to make in an exam.
Now, this quote is brilliant because it challenges that simple idea that inflation is always the bad guy. A small, predictable amount of inflation is actually seen as a good sign. It suggests the economy is buzzing, that incomes are growing, and people are spending. It's the high, out-of-control inflation that causes all the problems. Which brings us to our final big question. Is inflation always a bad thing? And the answer really is no. The crucial point here, the real takeaway, is understanding the massive difference between the government's target of low and stable inflation versus the real damage caused by high, unpredictable inflation, or its scary opposite, deflation. If you can get your head around that nuance, you have absolutely mastered this topic.